Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. What are the World Affairs Councils? What are the councils doing to promote international peace, cooperation, and education? We'll be back in just a moment to talk about these and other important issues. Welcome back to our program. You're watching Global Connections Television, which is an independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. Today we're taking a look at a very interesting organization of about 300 around the United States that have a lot of international outreach, and those are the World Affairs Councils. My guest today is an expert on the World Affairs Councils. My guest today is Ms. Xiao Yin Zhao. Xiao Yin Zhao is the Executive Director of the World Affairs Council of Kentucky and Southern Indiana. Prior to joining the World Affairs Council, Xiao Yin Zhao focused her work on corporate social responsibility issues, first as a doctoral student at the University of Pittsburgh, Graduate School for Public and International Affairs, and later as a corporate compliance analyst and consultant at Jones Apparel Group. Xiao Yin Zhao, welcome to Global Connections Television.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you being with me. Xiao Yin, let's get right into it. We're talking about the World Affairs Council. Let's talk about in the macro. What exactly is the World Affairs Council concept? How many of them are there around the country? Then we'll focus on yours in a few moments.
Sure. The World Affairs Councils of America is the largest grassroots network of organizations. There's about at least one in any major city, sometimes more. And the whole mission of the World Affairs Councils of America is really to bring international issues to local communities, to raise awareness, kind of have in-depth discussions, bring expert speakers, and to kind of inspire local communities to learn more about what's going on around the world. So they do this by facilitating a series of speaking engagements, helping the local councils to identify the right kind of speakers for a given topic. So as part of that larger network, we're able to access a very wide variety and very distinguished group of speakers that we can bring in and to really kind of go deep into whatever's going on that we think that the community might be interested in or should care about.
Now, you're a 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan organization.
That's right.
And you're primarily internationally, educationally oriented.
Yep.
Are you a membership organization? Can people join the World Affairs Council?
Absolutely. We are, like many nonprofits, very much supported by membership. We have different tiers, and we're actually rolling a new one out just to kind of show more value for people who like to attend all of the speaker series. But we're also supported by corporate sponsorship and the federal government through our federal programs. So those are the main sources of our financial support. But membership and individual engagement, those are the ones that we really care about because that tells us that we're important to people in the community.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if our viewers would like more, to talk about your International Visitors Program, they can go to www.worldkentucky.org and get a lot more information and see the programs that you're operating. And today we're talking about the World Affairs Council of Kentucky and Southern Indiana, but there are about 300 more around the country, and we could be talking about a World Affairs Council in Nevada or in Arizona or California or New York or New Jersey. So this is just sort of a microcosm of other activities and similar activities that may be taking place all around the country with a lot of international outreach. But let's focus on your international visitors programs and talk about one Open World program. Sounds fascinating. What exactly is that?
The Open World program is the only congressionally funded exchange program, professional exchange program from the federal government. And it focuses on exchanges mainly with the former Soviet countries. The goal of that is to bring young fairly young professionals from those former Soviet satellite countries to the U.S. to gain greater knowledge, professional development, exchange with their counterparts in the U.S., but also kind of have a more of a cultural understanding, deeper cultural understanding of the U.S. So all of these exchange programs, there's a professional component and then there's a cultural component. The professional is to kind of have create networks, ongoing, hopefully ongoing, some kind of a partnership at the end of that program. But also, a very important part of it is the diplomatic side of it, is to get them an opportunity to meet with everyday Americans, to live, they stay with host families, to see what goes on and to talk to people who are not really necessarily engaged with the government, just to see what their viewpoints about and to see the diversity, cultural richness of America. So the Open World program is is a short-term program, as with all of these federal programs, very much subject to the federal funding. But we've had quite a number of them, and the groups go throughout the U.S. So in Louisville, we'll host a couple of them in a year, but many other councils who are able to host exchanges also do the same in their communities.
Mm-hmm. And these would include a wide range of topics such as
yes.
Lawyers, bankers,
judges,
legislators, judges.
A lot of this is really about spreading democracy and institutional knowledge, democratic institutions through these countries that are coming here. So judges, accountable governance, young professionals, a lot of entrepreneurship, small business type of programs, education, a large part of it. So it's very, very, the lawyers, like you say, judges. So these programs are really kind of look at the different kinds of institutions that we have that makes a democratic society successful. And then for these professionals who come, they're usually, selected by many of the embassies abroad that say, this is the program, these are the leaders that we think are going to be making a difference, who's going to be successful in the country or in this particular professional arena, and we want to get them to know what we do in America, be friends, before they become leaders.
Exactly, right. And so you're really providing technical assistance to people who are going to be future leaders. And another program, I guess, ties right into it is your Youth Leadership Exchange.
Yes.
That is also the same type of program, is that correct?
That's similar, yes. The Youth Exchange programs, there's a variety of them, and right now the federal, the State Department is very focused on developing youth and throughout the world, because that's the largest percentage of population worldwide. And in many of the conflict countries, for example, right now we have the Iraqi students in town, and many other countries we've hosted in Tunisia, North African countries during the Arab Spring times. So, it's to bring the young students, I should say high school students. They're all high school students. They all have to speak English. And they go through a very competitive process. They apply and then they get interviewed before being selected. And then they come to the U.S. for about 3 weeks, a combination of doing camps, meeting with other Americans, but then in host communities like ours for about 2 weeks to learn and get in-depth experience on a particular thing that we're offering. So for example, we in Louisville right now, we're offering about social entrepreneurship, but we've done leadership development, social engagement. So really kind of giving the students an opportunity to meet other American students, learn about Americans in terms of the life, the living, the cultural differences, but also giving them opportunity to enrich themselves more so that when they go back home, they may be equipped with some great ideas that they will think about if they can implement just, for the future of their countries. So that's the whole, it's again, professional, but also cultural and diplomatic. All of these are, they align with America's foreign policy objectives.
Exactly, right. Yeah. And of course, this is beneficial not only for the people coming over, but also for the people at this end. It's a two-way street. Everybody learns from each other, and you exchange ideas, you exchange information, you learn, as you mentioned, the cultural component is extremely important. They learn more about the United States, Kentucky in particular. people in Kentucky learn much more about the situation in Iraq or perhaps during the Arab Spring. So it's not a one-way street to where you say, well, we'll just bring people over and they'll have a vacation. It's really a learning experience that is very beneficial to everyone, is it not?
Absolutely, and I'm so glad you brought it up because usually when we think about these exchange programs, we're thinking about the people that we're bringing in. But you're right. This is really a way for us. What we say very informally a lot of times, we bring the world to Kentucky or to Southern India and to our local community. It's a way for them to really have an opportunity to meet and to engage with people who are throughout the world without having to leave their own homes, right? But to talk to them, to learn about their their culture and their practices and their thoughts, and beyond what we hear on CNN or other news outlets, because those are just very short time span pieces, but to really live with them even. And so absolutely, most of these students and the Open World Exchange programs, they all stay with host families. It's hard sometimes to get the host families to be part of it, recruit people to be host families. But the ones what we do, they do it over and over again. For the young people, particularly when they have kids at home, it's a way for their students to be exposed to a global society, being a global citizen in some ways. So they enjoy it, and they tell us all the time, we get so much out of this. And many of them continue that relationship beyond the time when the students are here. So once they leave, they still are in contact and develop those relationships.
Exactly. When you think about the students who are coming over, or other professionals too, when they get here, have they discovered that there's more to Kentucky? I mean, when we think of Kentucky, you talk to people out of state, they think of Kentucky Fried Chicken, they think of Churchill Downs, thoroughbreds in the bluegrass area. Muhammad Ali is from Louisville, Kentucky, the Louisville Slugger baseball bat. But did they find other parts of Louisville and Kentucky that they hadn't heard about, that they really find fascinating?
Well, when they're here, we try to take them outside the city, and they certainly hit all of those spots that you mentioned. So we'll take them to places like the caves, Mammoth Cave.
Right.
For the students, take them to like Holiday World, something to really be fun. But for the most part, those are pretty much those areas that they want to see, they've heard about, and that puts us on the map. And that's a very important component of this. And what we do is that it's a big world out there. Lots of cities, lots of small communities, and Louisville, Kentucky, and even this surrounding area, it's not small in the U.S. We're kind of mid-sized, but compared to Chicago and San Diego, those places we're considered small. And I think many times the visitors, they come, they find that it's much similar to their homes. So there's that affinity right away. It's easier for them to relate to, whereas it's completely different in New York and Chicago. That's what they see on the TV, and there's a stereotype, but it doesn't really ring kind of true to them in terms of their daily lives. So we find many visitors actually really enjoy Kentucky and the communities that we have here because they can relate, and they go to other places to travel to as a tourist, but they can see that you can live here. So that's the difference. If you're talking about trying to get people to understand and to be able to identify what you do, then this is an ideal type of place, community for them to come to.
Exactly. They can certainly identify with people who are living in a community similar to the one at home. Yeah. Now, you also have a speakers program, and you've had some really high-powered speakers in the past. Mikhail Gorbachev, who is famous for his perestroika and glasnost, and also the dissolution of the former Soviet Union. You've had General Colin Powell, Christiane Amanpour, who is very well known with CNN anchor, and has been with a lot of other media outlets over the years, I guess. Right. What is the purpose of this program, and what are some of the messages that these speakers bring to the community and help update them as to what's going on in the world?
Right. So our speaker program is really the most direct way for us to get the community involved. The visitor program tend to, get organizations involved. Individuals have much limited ways of getting involved with them unless they voluntarily do so. With the speaker program, it's our way to kind of bring people in and go to the audience and say, come and hear about this topic that's being talked about right now in the world, and learn a little bit more from people who work on it every day. and who do research on it, for example, or who are journalists and report on it, who's written about it. So it's really for them to come and hear some things that they may not have heard, different viewpoints than from what we generally hear, directly from news. So it's, we have a lot of diplomats who are part of these speaker series, and diplomats tend to, are very familiar with the World Affairs Councils. And having worked overseas and really been on the ground, they are great for us just to kind of get a sense of what is the real situation like in Syria, for example, or, which we hope to explore. But, the other speakers, we're really looking at what are things that's really of concern in the world right now. In past year, we've had people who come in and talk about digital freedom, internet freedom. That's an important issue. And we were talking earlier about how the spread of information is really fueling a lot of things that's happening in the world. So then it raises a lot of questions of internet freedom. And then there's the cybersecurity concerns, more of those, security issues. So our speaker topics really run a wide variety of themes. Because nowadays, the premise is that you can talk about anything and it will have a global component to it. So, we can talk about energy. Energy's always been global, but we sometimes really think about it as a domestic issue. So the goal is to bring people in, experts, to talk about a topic that we are maybe already familiar with, but to understand it from what implication does that have in a global sense, and how does that impact me? Why is that important for me to know? So we try to enrich people intellectually by doing this, but also I think it's important because people need to be equipped with that kind of deeper knowledge and be able to engage in that kind of conversations if they want to be successful and competitive in this kind of a very, very global society.
And they certainly need to be, for sure.
Need to be.
And as I mentioned a minute ago, they could go to worldkentucky.org to see what you're doing, see the countries that you've been involved with, like Iraq, Tunisia, different ones like that. But if someone's living overseas and says, well, I'd like to know more about it, they could also just Google World Affairs Councils, and they can identify cities and see which programs they're involved with. It could be Quito, Ecuador, it could be Nigeria, the country of Nigeria, or South Africa, or wherever. And there are thousands and thousands of programs around the country with people in other parts of the world. So they can certainly do that. Now, you're focusing also on younger people to help them better understand the world, and it's extremely important that they do because they're going to be the future leaders. One program you have is the Academic World Quest. What exactly is the Academic World Quest?
The Academic World Quest is a kind of a nationally administered program initiative of the World Affairs Councils of Americas. So it's been in place for quite a number of years, but it's essentially a knowledge competition. The competition is first held at the local level. So each World Affairs Council, not everybody chooses to hold it, but the ones that do, we try to get all the high schools engaged, get high schools to form teams of 4, and we give them all the materials, a lot of them based off the Great Decisions series, and they practice on their own and they learn on their own, but we provide with some kind of support on a variety of topics that they're going to be competing on. So it's kind of like a quick recall type of trivia of sorts, but they practice and they study, and the topics range from world history, world religions, current events, environment. So quite a number, a mix of current and past events, but all globally centered. So they practice, and then we hold one competition every year, usually in February, where we bring all of the teams together at one central location. They're usually in Louisville, and we just hold a competition. We give the trivia questions, and all the teams compete at that point for a couple of hours. At the end of that, we'll have a winner. The winner of the competition then is able to go to the national level and compete nationally with all the winners of all the other World Affairs Councils in Washington, D.C. But in addition to that competition, they actually get to go to, say, embassy receptions. They get to learn from other experts and hear from them about a particular issue, and just engaging youth in more of an interest in international affairs. So we've been doing that for quite a number of years, and we really want to get students involved. Sometimes it can be a struggle because not every school and not every student's really, there's so much demand on their time. So
exactly right. Now, how does that tie in with your Global Education Consortium?
The Global Education Consortium is actually a very, very, very new initiative. Just started in the past year, and we're still getting people more involved. That currently, that focuses really on the higher education. So the goal of that was to thinking about how can the World Affairs Council leverage our competency in terms of providing international global programs for the to facilitate the goals, the international education goals of other higher education institutions around our neighborhood. And in Louisville, we have quite a number of, colleges and universities. And so we have conversations to say, what are your education goals, international education goals? And this is what we can offer. And create a kind of a consortium of partners who then can access our programs for their students. So students will be able to, as part of that consortium, their students will be able to attend all of our programs free of charge. We would also bring speakers onto campuses of the partners for very exclusive engagements that's open only to those, to those partners, all of their students, so they don't have to go off campus, because you know how it is very difficult to get students off of their campus and do anything. But bringing speakers to them and bringing international visitors to the campuses for very small discussions. So students get an opportunity to really meet with emerging leaders from around the world, and talk about that particular professional area that they're engaged in. So that's the kind of the benefit, and that's what we're trying to do. We're leveraging our expertise and be a mediator to kind of, create more efficiency in international education programming, but also to be able to bring our programs out into the different education institutions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, before we run out of time,
Yeah.
you have many speakers coming in. You're doing a webcast with former President Jimmy Carter. You have the Moroccan ambassador to the United States coming, and our viewers can go to your website to learn more about the dates. But you're also doing another program called Promoting Entrepreneurship Worldwide. What's going to be the thrust of that program?
Well, the speaker of that program, Karen DeMars, she is the director of the Global Entrepreneurship Program at the State Department. And that program is really, the aim of that program is to develop entrepreneurs, to provide technical assistance for our entrepreneurs worldwide to be successful. Again, it's, as with all State Department programs, there's the diplomatic, aim, foreign policy aim, which is, the more successful people are in small business, the more democratic they tend to be, right? So that, for our talk, we're interested in, how can we get American entrepreneurs? How do we participate? And you may know, Louisville is a very, very entrepreneurial, small business oriented city. That's where the thrust of a lot of its economic initiatives has been for the last couple of years. So we want to bring her in and have her talk about a little bit more of, how can governments help local entrepreneurs, U.S. entrepreneurs, access foreign markets? How do they get involved in that whole initiative to be part of that entrepreneurship, promoting the entrepreneurship worldwide, whether it's expertise or, or going in and creating partnerships, et cetera.
Exactly. And I would think this would be of great interest to a large number of businesses and just people in the general community too would want to learn more about this. And of course, as I mentioned, you have some really fascinating speakers. They have an opportunity to participate. The attendance rates or fees are very low. It doesn't cost a fortune to come to hear these outstanding speakers. And of course, they have such powerful messages to deliver. And that's what we're really about in promoting international peace and cooperation and educational understanding. as to what's going on in other parts of the world, what's happening in the United States, and how we can all look at these problems together and how we can work on them together, because it's important that we do that, because if we don't, we're certainly not going to have a bright 21st century, that's for sure. So we really need to do that. But Xiao Yin Zhao, the Executive Director of the World Affairs Council for Kentucky and Southern Indiana, I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us on today's Global Connections program.